Utaratu, Justice Architecture, and the Global Health Boston Marathon 2027. Civilization advances not when chaos disappears, but when intelligence learns to govern it. Disorder is the raw material of progress, the quarry from which architecture is carved. In Ngatia Chapter 2, Utaratu, the principle of order from chaos, we encounter a profound truth. Entropy is not the enemy of human flourishing. Ungoverned entropy is. This principle, when applied to global health, reveals that disease, poverty, and inequity are not isolated tragedies. They are symptoms of unmanaged disorder within the architecture of civilization itself. The Global Health Boston Marathon 2027 emerges as a living enactment of Utaratu, a physical, moral, and economic demonstration that order must be built through deliberate exertion, disciplined structure, and intelligent design. The marathon is not merely a race across Massachusetts streets. It is a philosophical instrument, a kinetic metaphor for the reconstruction of global health systems through the transformation of chaos into coherence. Utaratu and the architecture of self-governance. Ngatia teaches that chaos is the default condition of existence. Left unattended, systems decay, bodies deteriorate, enterprises collapse, health systems fragment. Entropy does not negotiate. It advances silently, accumulating disorder until deliberate will intervenes. The Ngatia fellow does not curse chaos, but treats it as raw material. Order is not requested, it is constructed. This insight mirrors the global health crisis. The burden of disease across the world, measured in billions of disability-adjusted life years, dailies, is not simply the result of pathogens or biology. It is the manifestation of structural disorder. Health inequity is a failure of governance, capital formation, and informational flow. The book Blockchain for Global Health Equity reframes health as an information system. Disease emerges when communication collapses, within cells, within societies, within economic structures. Africa, carrying nearly a quarter of the world's disease burden despite housing less than a fifth of its population, represents not a failure of medicine, but a failure of systemic order. Ngatia's Utaratu provides the philosophical response. Order begins internally before it manifests externally, just as the fellow disciplines thought time and environment to produce coherence. Global health must discipline its economic and informational systems before clinical outcomes can stabilize. The marathon as a ritual of order. The Boston Marathon is among humanity's oldest athletic rituals of disciplined endurance. The Global Health Boston Marathon 2027 elevates this ritual into a symbolic and operational framework for health transformation. The marathon embodies the Ngatia doctrine that order emerges through repetition, structure, and sustained exertion. Running is the imposition of rhythm upon biological chaos. The human body, left inactive, drifts toward metabolic disorder, cardiovascular decline, and neurological deterioration. Training restores order through structure, fixed routines, disciplined nutrition, measured exertion. The marathoner becomes a living demonstration of Utaratu. The 2027 Global Health Marathon extends this metaphor to civilization itself. The story of a physician-scientist recovering from myocardial infarction and rebuilding life through structured rehabilitation represents more than personal triumph. It symbolizes the reconstitution of global health systems through deliberate design, scientific guidance, and moral discipline. The runner becomes a microcosm of civilization. The cardiologist becomes the architect of structured recovery. The race becomes a laboratory of endurance, resilience, and trust, the same virtues required to rebuild failing health infrastructures worldwide. From entropy to justice architecture. Chapter 4 of Blockchain for Global Health Equity introduces a radical concept. Global health is fundamentally a justice architecture. Social justice, the visible layer of healthcare access. rests upon deeper structural layers of distributive and economic justice. Without these submerged foundations, social justice becomes performative, fragile, and unsustainable. Ngatia's Utaratu aligns perfectly with this hierarchical architecture of justice. Disorder in global health arises when systems attempt to impose outcomes without constructing foundational order. Building clinics without long-term financing structures mirrors the Ngatia attempting to construct straight walls with a crooked level. Declaring healthcare rights without enabling economic participation reflects the illusion of external order without internal governance. The iceberg model described in the Chapter 4 of Blockchain for Global Health reveals this structural failure. Social justice represents the visible tip. Beneath it lie distributive justice, the fair allocation of resources, and economic justice, the capacity to generate and exchange value. When these foundational layers remain chaotic, healthcare systems inevitably collapse into entropy. The marathon illustrates this principle vividly. The runner cannot complete the race by focusing solely on the finish line. Success depends on foundational preparation, training discipline, metabolic regulation, cardiovascular conditioning. Order at the finish emerges from order at the beginning. Blockchain as the mathematics of Utaratu. If Utaratu is the philosophy of transforming chaos into order, blockchain is its technological embodiment. Blockchain encodes trust through distributed consensus, transforming informational entropy into structured governance. Blockchain for Global Health Equity describes blockchain as the mathematics of surprise and entropy derived from Claude Shannon's information theory. It records uncertainty into trust, randomness into consensus, and invisible assets into structured capital. Hernando de Soto identified the tragedy of dead capital, assets that exist but remain invisible to formal economic systems. This invisibility perpetuates poverty and disease. Blockchain resolves this disorder by rendering assets visible, tradable, and governable. The 4 tokens described in the justice architecture represent operational instruments of Utaratu. Economic Justice Token, EJT, transforms property and labor into visible economic agency. Actuate Token, ACT, converts intellectual knowledge into distributive capital. Mumbai Token formalizes maternal and caregiving labor as measurable economic infrastructure. Token Brick converts informal land ownership into investable property capital. Together, these systems impose order upon economic chaos, enabling communities to finance their own health systems rather than relying on unstable external aid. Stoic discipline and the ethics of global health. The Stoics taught that virtue arises from mastering what lies within one's control while accepting external uncertainty. Utaratu echoes this doctrine. Order begins with internal discipline, thought governance, time management, biological rhythm, before extending outward. Global health, historically, has violated this Stoic principle. It has attempted to impose external order through foreign aid, policy declarations, and episodic interventions while neglecting foundational economic sovereignty. The result has been fragile systems vulnerable to collapse during crises such as pandemics. The marathon embodies Stoic resilience. The runner cannot command weather, terrain, or fatigue, but the runner can command preparation, pacing, and endurance. Similarly, decentralized health systems empower communities to govern their economic and informational infrastructure, creating resilience against global shocks. The marathon as economic and informational mobilization. The Global Health Boston Marathon is not simply a fundraising event. It is a decentralized mobilization mechanism linking physical endurance with financial architecture. Each participant represents a node in a distributed network of advocacy, capital formation, and knowledge dissemination. Sponsors, clinicians, scientists, engineers, and community leaders become co-runners in a global relay of justice construction. Funds generated through the marathon are directed toward reducing maternal mortality, strengthening health infrastructure, and training multidisciplinary professionals. But more importantly, the marathon symbolizes the transition from charity-based healthcare to capital-based healthcare, aligning with the Ngatia principle that order precedes prosperity. Order as sequence, the long run toward global equity. Ngatia emphasizes that order emerges through sequence. The roof is never installed before the foundation. Global health reform requires the same sequential discipline. Establish economic justice through tokenized capital formation. Build distributive justice through transparent allocation systems. Achieve social justice through equitable healthcare access. The marathon reflects this sequence physically. Training precedes participation. Participation precedes completion. Completion precedes transformation. Conclusion, becoming architects of coherence. The Global Health Boston Marathon 2027 represents more than a race. It is a ceremonial enactment of civilization's deepest mandate to transform entropy into order through intelligence, discipline, and moral architecture. Ngatia's Utaratu reminds us that chaos is not an adversary but a calling. The global burden of disease is not merely suffering, it is raw material awaiting governance. Blockchain provides the technological grammar of order. The justice architecture provides the institutional blueprint. The marathon provides the ritual embodiment. Together, they form a unified movement, a long run toward coherence, sovereignty, and health equity. The runner crosses the finish line, not as a victor over distance, but as a demonstration of a universal truth. Order is never accidental. It is carved through deliberate exertion, sustained discipline, and visionary design. And in this long run toward global health equity, humanity itself becomes the Ngatia Fellow, rising each morning prepared not to await order, but to impose it upon the chaos of history. For more about the Marathon for Global Health and how to participate, please visit https://actuate.bio/Boston 2027.